All right. Good morning, everybody. We're going to get started. I know I'm the last session between you and getting back home or getting to the NASCAR Hall of Fame, so I want to get us started on time. Today, I'm going to talk to you about sustainability in data centers as a commissioning provider and how you can bring commissioning provider services to your owner in the data center industry. Please check in using the CX Energy 2025 app. Legalese. Okay, so a little bit about me. Same suit jacket, lighter hair today. I began my career as a controls technician in the water treatment industry in 2008. So that was my first introduction into the construction world. I worked on my first data center in 2011 in Kings Mountain, North Carolina. So if there's any local folks in here, that's about 35 miles west of here. So I consider this something of a homecoming for me. So I made this drive plenty of times from Pittsburgh down to a little bit west of Charlotte into Kings Mountain. So that was the first data center I ever worked on. Also my first exposure to sustainability. So that facility was certified LEED Gold, I believe version 2009. I think that was before V4, but I didn't look that up. And I am a champion for all things sustainability. I drove down here from Pittsburgh in my EV, had to stop and charge 3 times, but other than that, it was a great drive. Working on getting solar panels put in at my house and switching to all electric appliances. So I'm not only talking the talk today, I also walk the walk. I feel like I have to keep my head down like this to get in the mic. Can you still hear me like that? Okay. A little bit about Branch Pattern. We're a full-service MEP as well as a building science sustainability firm. Our mission is improving life through better built environments. We have, as I said, a building science team in Pittsburgh, Kansas City, Omaha, and Denver, full suite of services. So I want to get started talking about energy consumption in data centers to lay the baseline of where we are and where we're headed. So data centers consumed 4.4% of total US electricity in 2023 and 1 to 1.5% worldwide. It's according to energy.gov. The projected electricity use, they're projected to consume 6.7% to 12% of energy in 2028. So that's only 3 years from now. And to put that into perspective, since 2014, data centers consumed 58 terawatt hours, and they're expected to consume 580 terawatt hours by 2028. So in 14 years, it's going to be a 10-fold increase in energy consumption, and it's not going down anytime soon. So when we think of carbon emissions in data centers, we have this picture in our heads of the smokestacks at a data center. I've never seen a data center like this, but this is the picture that was drawn for me. The average data center consumes electricity of 50,000 residential homes, and the cloud now has a greater carbon footprint than the airline industry, and that is according to MIT.edu. As far as worldwide emissions, data centers account for 0.3% of overall carbon emissions worldwide. So the learning objectives for today, our overall goal is a goal for energy reduction in data centers. I want to talk about sustainability in terms of the built environment and carbon emissions, the key performance indicators in data centers, and how we can improve those, how we benchmark the key performance indicators of data centers and making sure that information's available to all team members and not a secret knowledge, and where retro commissioning plays in for data centers as well. So what is sustainability anyways? It's not just a buzzword. It gets thrown around almost in every project, and sometimes we're following sustainability principles, or you actually pursue one of the green building certifications, whether it's LEED, Green Globes, GRESB, BREEAM. GRESB is for real estate, BREEAM is more European, UK certification. And sustainability doesn't have to be a pipe dream in data centers. Decarbonization and sustainability both have their place. Sustainability in the built environment. So when we talk about sustainability, we're our main focus is resource consumption. We want to focus on resource efficiency, low energy, and low carbon emissions. It's an ongoing process. It starts at day 0 of design. As soon as the design documents, schematic design is laid out, sustainability principles need to be integrated into that process. And for carbon emissions, I want to talk a little bit about operational carbon as well as embodied carbon, so that we know what all goes into the carbon emissions for a data center. And existing data centers is my main focus here today, because the greenest building, as they say, is one that is already built. So let's talk carbon. According to Architecture 2030, the carbon emissions for the built environment, 11% is building materials in construction. So that's embodied carbon. That's all of the carbon emissions related to the construction of the building. And then 28% is building operations, and then the rest of the 60 or so percent in carbon emissions is industry, transportation, and whatever other is. So as I just said, embodied carbon, to give you a nice photo here, embodied carbon is the manufacture, transport, installation of construction materials, and then operational carbon is the building energy consumption and the emissions that are released through the operation of the building. How many people are familiar with scope emissions? So I can breeze through this. Okay, I only see a couple hands go up, so I'll take a drink of water and go over this. Okay, so let me flip back before we put it in a data center perspective. When we talk about scope emissions, there are 3 categories. I'm not sure who came up with this. I didn't look into that. But the 3 different categories, scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. Scope 1 is direct emissions, so think of natural gas used for heating. Anything that is consumed on site, fossil fuels, is a scope 1 emission. So natural gas for heating or domestic water, diesel for generators. Also accounts for company vehicles, the vehicle fleet. If those are fossil fuel fired vehicles, then those are considered direct emissions. Indirect emissions are emissions from energy use not on site. So electricity is the biggest one there. And then scope 3 is everything else involved in the operation of the building that causes emissions. So customer activities, water usage, supply chain, materials, waste disposal, things like that. So when we get to data centers, most new data centers don't have scope 1 emissions, and if so, they're minimal. Like I said, company vehicles, natural gas heat, which is very, very rare. On-site kitchens, also rare, because these are pretty lightly staffed facilities. Emergency generators would be an on-site emission, but those are only used in an emergency. So this is typically less than 1%. Greatest source of emissions for data centers is scope 2. And this is also where us as commissioning providers can have the greatest impact. And if we are able to work with the data center managers, one thing that can be laid out up front is a re-examination of the power purchase agreement, the PPA. And depending on the region, if you're in Northern Virginia or Austin or one of these data center hotspots, the data center managers can advocate for more renewables. I mean, you're not going to get them the next day, but you can advocate for more renewables in the grid from the utility provider. So wind, solar, and hydro, instead of just using fossil fuels for electricity generation. Scope 3 for a data center, all emissions are covered in scope 1 and 2, supply chain, customer emissions for co-location data centers, and emissions associated with water consumption. Another question before I continue. How many people have worked in a data center as a commissioning provider beforehand? Okay, so maybe a third or so. Okay, so how do we reduce energy consumption in a data center as a commissioning provider? The biggest consumers of energy are servers and cooling. It used to be like a 50-50 split. These servers are getting more powerful every day, it seems like. And now it's more like a 60-40, 70-30 split, where the IT equipment is consuming more and more power, and cooling is needing to meet that power, but in terms of the overall energy consumption of the building is becoming a smaller factor. As a commissioning provider, we can't do much about the IT loads. Those are typically out of our control. The IT teams and data center managers are going to do what is necessary to meet the mission of the facility. We can advocate for areas where the operation of the data hall can be improved. So whether it's consolidation of racks or virtualization, or removing zombie servers, the servers that are just sitting there spinning and not really doing any sort of data processing. We could do that, but our focus is going to be more in our bread and butter, heating and cooling. Cooling, of course, in this case. MLC is the mechanical load component. This is becoming more of the focus with the latest ASHRAE standard, 90.4 for energy, the energy standard in data centers. So our focus is going to be on cooling energy and mechanical load components as commissioning providers. The ELC, which is the electrical loss component, these are also called electrical loss coefficients. I believe ASHRAE uses component, though. And the power distribution in the data center. And the EPMS system is a great source of information for all of these, for the power consumption and the losses in the power system in the data center. Okay, so I want to go over, there's a lot of information on this slide, so I'm going to spend some time on it. The key performance indicators in the data center. Since the early 2000s, PUE has been the gold standard, and PUE is a power usage effectiveness, and it's the ratio of total energy used by the data center compared to the energy used by the IT equipment. So total energy divided by IT energy. And it's going to be a number greater than 1, and it's like golf, lower score is better, so you want to get as close to 1 as possible. New data centers, they're coming in very close to 1, which is why PUE in new construction is becoming less and less of a focus. I mean, you don't want, the owner's not going to accept a PUE of 2 or 4 or 8 if you commission the data center and say, hey, we're done, here's the PUE, it's 1.79. That's not going to be acceptable. However, in existing data centers, PUE can be pretty high, and I'll get to that here in a moment. Another key performance indicator that the IT team likes to focus on, data center infrastructure efficiency. It's the inverse of PUE. It's expressed as a percentage. I like to say it tells you the same thing as PUE with the side of anxiety, because it's a percentage. So say you're at 90%, if something happens, you add more load to the data center, and that increases your PUE, it's going to decrease your DCIE. So you could be going from a 93% to 85%. So that metric is used, but I don't particularly like it. Efficiency KPIs, like I was just talking about, MLC, ELC, total usage effectiveness is coming into play as well. The nice thing about all these, they all use the same denominator. So anything that's effectiveness and the mechanical load component, they all use IT energy as the denominator. So mechanical load component, it's all of your energy consumed in the mechanical systems in the building. So your pumps, your crays, chillers, whatever's used for HVAC and mechanical divided by IT energy. Electrical loss component is a percentage, so that's just your losses and your power consumed at your IT equipment over the total power consumption in the building, and that'll give you a percentage. Gives you a percentage of how much you're losing from the entry into the building versus what is delivered at the data hall itself. Performance per watt, I think this is going to eventually replace PUE, but there needs to be a lot of monitoring and systems in place to be able to measure this, because this is seeing how the servers are performing, and in that performance, how much power they're consuming. So as I said, it will replace PUE one day, probably. And then sustainability KPIs. So these are becoming much more a focus as sustainability in data centers is becoming more adopted. So we can calculate carbon usage effectiveness, water usage effectiveness, scope emissions, which I talked about already. So those two, effectiveness, that's your carbon emissions, or your water usage divided by your IT energy. Renewable energy factor and energy reuse effectiveness. Renewable energy, on-site energy generation, whether it's PV arrays or wind or hydro, probably not, but and energy reuse effectiveness. The waste heat being generated by data centers is now being recaptured and used for the minimal amount of heating needed in the building, and there's the idea of taking this heat and using it for district heating systems. I know at the 2024 Paris Olympics, Equinix, data center provider, one of the largest ones, used the heat rejected from their data centers in the Paris area to heat the swimming pool for the Olympics. So I thought that was pretty cool. So they brought it up to temperature using data center heat. I don't know all of the intricacies of how it was piped in to heat the pool, but I thought that was pretty cool. And if you want to download the slide deck, here's the calculations that I was talking about to calculate all of those different KPIs. Okay, so there's a lot of information now. Where can we find all of this information? Could be available at the BAS, could not be. Could be available at DCIM, and DCIM is Data Center Infrastructure Management. That is what the IT team and data center managers use to see the performance of the data center as a whole, not just the cooling systems, which are going to be on the BAS. This gives the full picture of the data center from the IT perspective, mechanical energy consumption, power distribution. That's what the DCIM software is for. Or EPMS. I believe I said in the previous couple slides, EPMS is the electrical and power monitoring system, and that is giving you not only the power consumption used in the data center, but also the status of your power distribution equipment. So whether it's generators, your transfer switches, your power distribution units, those are available on the EPMS platform as well. But in terms of KPI, you're going to see power consumption at the EPMS, if there is one. In some of the older data centers that I want to focus on here, they might not have one. They might not have DCIM. They might just have a BAS. Sustainability, as commissioning providers, if our owner has a focus on sustainability, this is where we can come in and calculate these sustainability KPIs I talked about, whether it's water usage effectiveness, carbon usage effectiveness, just calculating overall scope emissions. Not as easy or readily available as PUE, but it can be calculated, and we have the capability to calculate that. And the good old OPR, which I've heard about multiple times in the conference today. The original goals for the facility should be in the OPR. Whether that needs to be revisited and updated and turned into a current facilities requirements, if that doesn't exist, that is also something that we can provide to our owners. Okay, so what KPIs are available to the data center O&M? The data center operations and maintenance team, they're the front line and the gatekeepers for the data center. They're typically the only staff that's there, full time. You'll have IT folks coming in and out, but as far as manning the facilities, it's the O&M team. So they're typically very well aware of how the data center is operating. So we want to make sure that KPIs are accessible to the O&M team, because they might have some excellent insight into how the systems are performing, whether there's overrides put in place, and why those overrides were put into place that are affecting the performance of the energy-consuming systems. Beyond the BAS, like I said, are there other platforms that are providing key insights, like a DCIM software? A lot of times those guys might not have access to that. That might live off-site, be monitored off-site, and they have no idea what's going on with it. Is PUE the only metric that is available, or is even that available? We want to broaden the performance tracking of the data center and make sure that all of these metrics are available for the operation and maintenance team, so that when we do perform retro commissioning and monitor the data center afterwards, we want to make sure the O&M team has access to this. We want to have their buy-in in the operation of the data center, not just have them putting out fires. So that's why I have the picture of Gandalf there. The maintenance personnel shouldn't have to fight for the information. Okay, now that we have laid the groundwork for sustainability and the performance of data centers, let's talk about commissioning, please. New construction commissioning. I'm going to touch on that briefly. I've heard it talked about twice already in the conference, so I don't want to spend too much time talking about it, but I want to lay out where we come in for new construction, where we come in for retro commissioning and recommissioning, and then the role of monitoring-based commissioning in the data center as well. Okay, for new data center commissioning, this standard has been around for a while. When I started in the data center world in 2011, this was already in place. It's kind of changed a little bit. I don't remember the tagging, but that is in there as well. And thank you to CX Planner for putting together this nice infographic. So briefly, the 5 levels, and sometimes there's a level 0 for design in this as well. Level 1, also known as red tag, is factory testing. So the commissioning provider, all stakeholders go to the factory where the data center equipment is being built, whether it's the air handlers, the computer room air handlers, the crays, or whatever other equipment, UPSs, PDUs, things like that, go to the factory and witness the operation of the equipment at the factory and sign off that it's good, it meets the owner's project requirements and is ready for delivery to the site. That's where level 2 comes into play. Level 2 is delivery to the site and check off that the equipment that arrived on site, the quantity is correct, and the equipment is the model that was there at the factory. So if you got, cray 101, crack 201 isn't showing up on site and saying this is the right one. Level 3 and 4 is more familiar to us as commissioning providers. Level 3 is your pre-functional checklist, your startups. Level 4 is functional performance testing. And level 5, also known as white tag, is integrated systems testing, so the interoperability of all of the systems in the data center. So that's a brief description of new data center commissioning. My focus is on existing data centers. That's where we can have the most impact for the owners in sustainability as commissioning providers. So retro commissioning for data centers, we can unlock hidden performance and improvements, providing retro commissioning. Retro commissioning, number 1 cost-effective ECM if you perform an energy audit at a data center. To drive energy savings without major capital investment, the retro commissioning program. But boost reliability, enhance uptime and system resilience. Uptime is the greatest concern to the owner. They don't want their facility to experience any downtime. So retro commissioning also gives the added benefit of not only the energy savings, also the enhancing uptime and system resilience and reestablishing reestablishing baseline performance, so how it was operating on day one, we can, as a commissioning provider, bring the data center back to that original baseline. Okay, so the first steps, if we are executing a retro commissioning program, we want to define the goal. What are we improving, and why does it matter? So we want to get to really meet with the owner and figure out what they want. Maybe they know right away, hey, we have a goal by 2030 to get our carbon emissions to 35% of what they were in 2018. We're nowhere near that. You know, we really need your help. Mr. CX or Ms. CX provider, please help us get that. They might not have that. Maybe they have a more nebulous goal in mind of just energy reduction. Whatever it is, we want to meet with them, define the goal, figure out why it matters to them, and lay out the plan of how we're going to meet that goal. If they just want to have a better performing data center, start with PUE. It's easy to calculate, probably accessible somewhere, as long as this data center has been built in the last 15 years, you probably have PUE. It might just be at the BAS or at the EPMS. So PUE is somewhere easy to start with if they want to save energy and improve the performance of the data center. If it's greater than 1.5, guarantee you can lower it. If it's 4, 2, 3, even better, even easier. And if you want to reduce the emissions, like I said, that's possible as well. We can help the owners and data center providers reach those goals of reducing emissions and carbon reduction. We want to also consider equipment life cycles. So IT hardware evolves way faster than our air handlers and chillers and electrical distribution equipment. Just think now of the rise of AI. I mean, AI, nobody really talked about it. What year is it, 2025? 4 years ago, 3 years ago. The first time I heard about it really was the end of 2022 when the president of our company was in our Pittsburgh office and was like, hey, go to this website and ask them what a commissioning provider does. And I did, and I'm like, holy crap, that was wild. And that's only escalated since then. So think of the evolution in the chips and the IT equipment hardware. Energy consumption is going to go up. Our mechanical systems, they're getting better. The chillers now are way better than they were, 30 years ago, and they can operate on, next to no condenser water flow. I know one of my proudest moments when I was a controls contractor was running a chiller upside down. So where our condenser water entering temperature into the chiller was lower than the leaving water temperature of the chiller, because they had to run this chiller to serve the data center. Didn't matter if it was 10 degrees outside in West Virginia and the temperature of our condensed water was 38 degrees. They needed to produce 42 degree chilled water. So better figure out how to make that chiller run. So like I was saying, our goals, I probably talked about everything on this slide already. Carbon reduction, water use reduction, energy reduction, whatever the goals are, define them. Develop current facilities requirements. If this was a data center that was commissioned in the last 5 years, and it was a lead project, that document should exist somewhere. If not, then we can create that with the owner. That's going to be the document that captures what their goals are and what the goals are for the facility. And a retro commissioning program will give you the opportunity to realize those goals. If you want to reduce a metric that you do not currently measure, qualified commissioning provider can benchmark that. So that's my spiel for if there were only any data center managers in here, but I don't think that there are. If you don't have the infrastructure to do so, us as commissioning providers, if they don't have that, we can look at the equipment and figure out what the carbon emissions are with the operation of the chiller. The chiller's been consuming this much energy for a month. This is the emissions associated with the electricity, with the power purchase agreement, and this is the emissions of running that chiller. It's possible. It's not an easy step, but it's definitely something we can do. And retro-commissioning is the first step to sustainable operation. So let's fast forward a little bit before I get to the next slide. So we sit down with the owner, we identify what their goals are. They want to reduce their PUE. Say it's 4 or it's 5. I know when I started in the industry in 2011, as I was saying, we did a lot of enterprise data centers, which, for those that don't know, an enterprise data center is where the company builds their own data center that houses their own equipment. So these used to be really common, not so much anymore. So you would get where, Capital One Bank would have a data center, or PNC Bank, or Merrill Lynch would have their own data center. Everybody had their own data center. It's like, you get a data center, you get a data center, you get a data center. That's not the case anymore, because now with the colo data centers, it's much more cost effective to just wheel your servers over to somebody's data center, drop them in there, all of the infrastructure's there, you just have to rent the space. So those are really becoming less and less frequent unless you are one of the big tech companies. So unless you're a Meta, you're a Google, you're an Apple, whomever, they have so much equipment that they need their own data centers. It doesn't make sense for them to try to rent space from a Digital Realty or a QTS or an Equinix. So what I was getting at with that, enterprise data centers, those are, as commissioning providers, the greatest opportunity for us to provide energy savings, because when those were built, I don't have a slide for this, but enterprise data centers typically had a PUE around like 4 or 5. I know when I was in the industry and we started up, when we got to if the PUE was like 3, we were like, oh my God, this is great. And now Google's data centers, I think their best one is like 1.07 or 1.08. So there's a lot of opportunities in the data center world for us to help owners and get them to their operational PUEs and operational carbon emission goals. So we are hired as a commissioning provider. We perform the retro commissioning program, and we identify some low-hanging fruit, medium-hanging fruit, and high-hanging fruit, hence the tree. Okay, so I just want to go over briefly some common energy-saving implementation strategies at data centers. And some of these are really basic, but you don't know till you run the program and figure out what's going on. Is there quite simply equipment that is on that could be off? So for data centers, for those that aren't familiar with the typical infrastructure, you'll have a raised floor, like this platform, where the air handler is sitting out here, your servers are sitting here, and the air handler is just pumping cold air onto the floor, up to the data center. Up to the servers, they're rejecting the heat out the back end, and then it's being recycled back to the air handler over there. So as equipment is moved, added, replaced, you could have 2 air handlers running right here and an empty server rack. I've seen it. There's nothing here, and they're just pumping air over this rack with nothing in it. So you could probably shut one of those air handlers off, and nothing's going to happen. Set points. Why are they always changing? Does anybody know? My wife and I have started, I don't know if I want to call it binge watching, but we watched the Unsolved Mysteries series from like the early 80s through mid 90s. We've been watching them like every night before we go to bed. I'm convinced set points could be an unsolved mystery because they're changing and nobody ever seems to know why. And nobody touched it, but somehow the set point changed. Quick story. This data center I was talking about earlier in Kings Mountain, North Carolina, about 3 years after I worked on it, the data center manager, he had just taken over, the other guy left, went to work for, I don't remember who, UPS or Verizon in their data center, something like that. And he called me, he's like, Sean, man, my Cray, the chilled water valves are 100%. the data center's barely keeping temperature. I don't know what's going on. Can you come down here and he said it needed a tune-up. I was like, okay, yeah, sure, Joe, I'll come down, we'll see what's going on. So I get there, and he's right, I'm looking at the Cray units, they're 100%, that's getting to like 90, 95, like right on the edge of where the computers are not gonna be happy with that temperature. So I'm like, well, why are the valves open so far? What's the chill water temperature? He's like, oh, well, I can't remember the guy's name, maybe Bob. We'll say Bob. Bob bumped it up to 55 from 45. I'm like, that's 10 degrees. I was like, why don't we just put it back to 45 and see what happens? So we put it back to 45. It's like 10 a.m. I watched it the rest of the day. Temperature slowly started creeping down to like, 70, 75 in the data hall. Chilled water valves were cutting back, and everything looked great. I was like, all right, well, let's just, let it run overnight. I'll be at the hotel, call me if anything goes wrong. And, came back in the next day and it was running fine. And, I flew back home and he called me. He's like, man, I don't know what you did, but everything's running great. I'm like, Joe, I just put the temperature back to where it was. Now, that wasn't an energy savings component, but as far as resiliency and uptime, I mean, that thing was, if they added another computer, there's a good chance this would go into a thermal overload where it's so hot that they can't run. So set points, we know what the design values are. Let's make sure that we are maintaining those and making sure the facility is running at an optimal temperature and where it was designed to run. So like I said, it might not be the best energy savings, but as far as uptime and resilience, we want to make sure it's, like I said, number one factor is keeping it running. Don't be afraid to move floor tiles. So like I was saying, the underfloor air distribution, they use perforated floor tiles. So just picture, a 2x2 tile, except that has holes punched in it. So that's how you get the air from underneath the floor up through the floor into the server rack and to cool the equipment. They can move. So they are movable tiles. They're on a raised floor. If I was saying the scenario where you have the rack that has nothing in it, shut that air handler off, put blank tiles, move your air to where you actually have heating. And then humidification, the latest standard for ASHRAE 90.4 2022, the relative humidity requirement is like 20 to 80%, which in almost all of the country, you pretty much need no dehumidification or humidification. You could just let them run. So there's a lot of enterprise data centers that still have humidifiers on the data hall floor providing humidification. They can probably be turned off. So a medium hanging fruit, experiment with temperatures within limits, not like what I said, but the servers are becoming more tolerant, the ones that are still air cooled of higher temperatures. So maybe you can go from a 70 degrees up to an 80 degrees and nothing happen. Talk it over with the data center manager before you really put this in your report. Analyze airflow distribution. Like I was saying, don't just pick up tiles and move them. Let's analyze where we need the air and then move the tiles accordingly. The next two gets more into a capital improvement project, but not quite a replace equipment capital improvement project. Hot aisle and cold aisle containment. This is not a new thing, but if you get into these data centers that were built in the 90s, like some of the ones that I worked in, they pretty much just threw the Cray units wherever they thought they needed to go, put the racks near them, put the floor tiles where they thought they needed to go, let it rip. There was no thought to containing the cold air and the hot aisle and keeping the cold air and the hot air and keeping them segregated. So hot aisle and cold aisle containment is where you pump the air into a specific aisle, and then the servers are there. They pull the air from this aisle, shoot it into the other aisle, and then that is also contained. So they'll have walls that go all the way up, blank out panels, so there's no cross-contamination between the cold air and the hot air. So that's hot aisle and cold aisle containment. If you're in a data center from 1995, probably don't have that, and not as expensive as you would think to implement it. Power infrastructure losses. So PDUs and UPSs have really been improving quicker than our HVAC equipment has. So a lot of the new PDUs and UPSs have like eco modes where they consume next to no power. So that's also something, if you got a UPS from 1999 and you upgrade to a UPS from 2024, it is a capital investment, but there's been a lot of improvement in the technology for electrical consuming equipment in the last 25 years. I went way too far. Come on. Okay. I think it's the tree slide that's slowing it down. There we go. And the strategic improvements are capital investment projects. Is it time to upgrade? If it's been 20, 25 years, that's about the life cycle of chillers. I mean, this isn't where they drain down the chilled water system and shut the chillers off for the winter. 24/7, 365 they're running. 24/7, 365, the Cray units are running. That's gonna wear them down. If it's time for an upgrade, you know. Where are you in relation to ASHRAE 90.4? 90.4 is the energy standard for data centers. So give it a read, see where you are in comparison to that. See where your owner is in comparison to that. Is in-rack cooling feasible if chilled water is nearby? It could be. It could be that you just, your pipe's here and you just get a tap off and tell your IT team that now we have the capability for liquid cooling, and they'll be tickled to death about that. Air and water side economizer, that's a much more intensive process. That's where most of us probably know what air side economizer is, where you use cooler air for cooling. Water side's a little bit more complicated, where you have to have cooling towers and heat exchangers and some more infrastructure, but maybe that's feasible as well. And with the upcoming wave of immersion cooling for servers, where they are sitting in a dielectric liquid, and that's providing the cooling, and that's just being pumped back through a heat exchanger, and your chilled water's on the other side of that heat exchanger, you might need to have some chilled water and economizer cooling as part of a future upgrade. Okay, so now we have completed our retro commissioning program. What's the next step in the commissioning process? Monitoring-based commissioning. Perfect for data centers. Because if you're just gonna sit there and watch the screen, PUE is gonna creep back up, guaranteed. Because the IT team is not gonna stop adding stuff and not gonna stop adding more powerful servers as the old ones get replaced. And of course, they want new toys. They want the latest chips and latest equipment in there. They don't wanna keep the servers, the Dell Edge server from 2013. So monitoring-based commissioning, you get data for days. It's gonna give you the same operation, gonna give your O&M team the same operational data that the IT team has in their DSIM software. The DSIM is the Data Center Infrastructure Management. So if they have that, monitoring-based commissioning, excellent complement to DSIM software. Like I said, tag team champions right there. You get the fault detection and diagnostics with MBCX. It'll be living there. You can show your O&M team how to use it, and that'll put them on the level playing field with the IT team in terms of the DSIM software and what the DSIM gives them for visibility into the energy consuming devices in the data center. Continuous monitoring. The MBCX platform will tell you all of those KPIs and alert you when they don't meet your benchmarks. If your goal is PUE of 1.33 and you're at 1.4, it will tell you. You could set up alerts for that. For an operations tool, preventative maintenance, it's not just like having the BAS where, chilled water pump 1 fails, you get an alarm. You could set it up to the point as a commissioning provider where if the power consumption on chilled water pump 1, goes from 7 kW up to 14 or something, that gives you an early indicator that something's going on with that, and we can address that. As a managed service, of course, as a commissioning provider, we want to work with the operation and maintenance team, at least in the first 1 to 3 years, of how to use the monitoring-based commissioning platform and to use that as a managed service, where we, as the consultants, look into the monitoring-based commissioning platform and provide regular meetings, reports to the O&M team and owner of what's going on. So that's adverse conditions monitoring, like I talked about. It's a proactive approach. So where your BAS is just reactive. You have a high temperature, you have a failed piece of equipment, you have 95-degree temperatures on the data hall. You can not just respond to alarms, you can have the information at your fingertips, work with your owners, work with your O&M team, let them know, hey, northeast corner of the data hall, it was 80, now it's 87. Still within your operational limits, you're not hitting your high alarm of 95 degrees, but something's going on there. So let's look at that. And continuous energy improvement. I wish I had the slide from the monitoring-based commissioning presentation I went to yesterday afternoon. It was a great one, but they have the little curvy line at the bottom where monitoring-based commissioning is continually keeping you at that baseline energy consumption and not allowing you to creep back up, because if the O&M team does have to take some drastic action to improve, to handle some adverse condition that happened, it's going to be the monitoring-based commissioning platform is going to tell you, hey, you raised that chilled water temperature, or you locked that chilled water valve at 75% in the northeast corner. Hey, don't forget about that. Something's going on there. We have a lot of energy consumption up there. Let's go back and revisit that. It gives you the data you need to make, the insight you need to make data-driven decisions. And it's way more beyond the BAS. You get advanced tools, deeper analysis, smarter energy strategies. No longer do you have to look at trend logs on the BAS, which I do not enjoy. I don't know about you. And we have reached the checkered flag. So the final step in our sustainable operations, once our goals have been identified in sustainability, whether it's reducing energy use, whether it is helping your owner meet the 2030 goals that they have, or they want to be net zero by 2050. I have heard there are net zero data centers. I have never seen one, but if that's something that they want, I mean, you as a commissioning provider can get them on the track to that goal. We can reduce carbon emissions, water usage, retro commissioning, first step to meet that goal. And once a retro commissioning project is undertaken, let's make sure that our O&M team has the buy-in as well. We don't just want to work for the owner, the higher-ups, helping them meet their goals. The O&M team is going to advocate for us as commissioning providers as well. So let's get them in as stakeholders for the project. And then once retro commissioning is complete, monitoring-based commissioning slides right in, and it helps you to meet your sustainability goals for your owners, help them achieve sustainable operation for the life of the facility. And that's it. Please complete the session evaluation, and we've got a few minutes for questions, 12 minutes for questions. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, microphone, please, sorry. I went to the furthest person from you. Yeah, gentleman back there, please.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. It looks like PUE and these KPIs are a very important metric that, if you're going to create your project requirements too. But I've heard some arguments about among engineers, is that really the PUE we're getting, or is that the BS or the bullshit PUE? So what is the measurement standards? You're measuring the power in a data hall. Let's say this is a data hall or room, but it shares some air conditioning, for instance, with other support areas of that data center. How is all of this figured out, and is it really standardized?
No, it's not standardized. If we were given the opportunity to do a design review, we need to make sure that the monitoring equipment is in place, whether it's power meters or whatever, and make sure that the power distribution is segregated such that you can get an accurate PUE, that the mechanical load components are metered separately than the data hall, and like you're saying, any ancillary support spaces, whether it's electrical rooms or UPS rooms or battery rooms, are not just lumped into the white space being the data hall where the IT equipment is, so that you can get an accurate PUE. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. how to calculate those values, and because even the support space from one data center to another is completely different.
Yeah, PUE is not actually a good metric to compare data center performance because each data center is unique. So there's only so low it could possibly get. And like you're saying, you have to have that infrastructure in place. The calculation is your total energy divided by your IT energy. Now, whether you're getting accurate numbers for both of those, that's something that we would need to investigate. And if it is already built, that's something we could say, hey, your IT energy that you're using for your PUE is actually taking into account your battery room as well. So we need to segregate those two somehow to give you an accurate measurement. But yeah, it's this, the calculation is what it is, but there is no standard behind it.
That's what I was after. If you don't mind, if I can ask another question. I just heard during this convention that there was a new ASHRAE standard, I believe it's 126, that's going to define the commissioning of data centers. How is that related to 92.4 that you talked about?
90.4 is the energy standard. So that's from ASHRAE, the standard for the energy consumption in the data centers. It doesn't get into commissioning too deep, but it's more for the design professionals of what they need to meet in their design to be in compliance with the standard.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Up front here. I'm sorry? She's coming.
Thanks for the excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Do you have you run across any efforts to integrate renewable energy sources into a data center to improve the sustainability footprint?
Yeah, I have seen them with PV arrays. It's not that uncommon, especially these ones that have large land footprints. I've seen them have PV arrays. Now, the size of the PV array to meet energy demands, they're not really putting much of a dent into it, maybe 1 or 2%. But yeah, I think what is more common now is trying to recapture some of the energy that's being wasted and use it for heating, use it for district heating projects, trying to offset and reuse the energy that's being consumed by the IT equipment to offset the energy consumption. But yeah, you can have on-site renewables. You have to have a really big array or some really big turbines to even come close. You're welcome. Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
I imagine it's different for every data center, but are there trends in space temperature levels where, for example, at a university data center where they kind of built it among the IT offices, and so it's conditioned to meet, office temperature comfort levels versus, years ago I heard Google would let their data centers get up to like 88, 89 degrees.
Yeah.
People have to work in there, but they don't sit there all day, I imagine. Is there kind of a middle ground that you've come across where people are satisfied at, 80, something like that? And this would be for, my university is exploring a new data center to replace the one that's kind of grown, way too big for its britches. And so, I'm part of the many people team who are kind of scoping it out. And I want to be able to say, like, look, it doesn't need to be 70 in there.
Yeah, agreed. It does not need to be 70. It does not, unfortunately, does not need to be cool for people to work in there. So that's what I was saying about the cold aisle and hot aisle segregation, where if you go into the cold aisle, it's going to be, 50, 55 degrees. If you go in the hot aisle, it's going to be 100 degrees. So if you go to work in the hot aisle, you're going to be sweating. The upcoming technologies, like I was saying, liquid cooling and immersion cooling. Give it, I don't even want to say 20 years, 10, 15 years, all of these servers with the AI chips are going to need to be liquid cooled. Just having them have cold air available for them to pull through the server is not going to be enough to cool down those chips. They're going to need liquid and immersion cooling. But as far as the temperature standard, if you have more traditional servers like you would have in a university, you're not doing this extreme data processing. You're just storing student information, faculty, local server information. Yeah, 90, 95 degrees they can run at now. I know Microsoft, 10 years ago, they would keep it at like 110, and whenever the servers died, they just replace them. Like, it was cheaper for them to let them run for 2 or 3 years, die, replace them, than trying to keep it at, 75, 80 degrees to keep the servers cool. So they would just replace them.
Is the idea with liquid cooled racks, I guess, I'm not thinking we're going to go with immersion cooling, but there would be a separate air system just for general temperature control in the space. And then,
yeah, you can definitely segregate where, 75%, or you have one data hall, 200,000 square foot data hall is just underfloor air distribution, traditional setup, and then you have a small separate white space that's all liquid cooled servers. You could do it like that, or you can integrate them into the same area. You can segregate them like that.
And I have one related question to this one that was over here about energy monitoring. So is it expected that each rack unit has its own power meter that is communicating back to the central management system, or is it more typical to measure it at the switchgear for the data hall with a traditional electric meter, or both, to make a comparison?
Both.
I'll give this up.
So it used to be, I know I keep dating myself, back in my day, you would have 10, 15 kW in a rack. Now they're 100 plus kW in a rack. So it's more and more, and as they want to keep performance, at the optimal level, you're getting power meters at the racks. You're getting floor-mounted PDUs, power distribution units, for each rack, because those racks are consuming so much power that you just put a separate power meter on it. But yeah, you can just go to the distribution panels, put a meter there, and say this, this serves row 1. This is our power distribution for row 3, et cetera, et cetera. Or you can go to the granularity of having a power meter at each rack. Yeah, your options are endless. You're only limited by, money. Any more questions? All right, let's head home. Thank you.